live show, but unfortunately with the movement control and the entire Asia Pacific gone haywire, we can't really do anything. However, we are planning to basically have the show, live show, later on when the movement control is all basically under control, pandemic is gone, and people are safe and healthy, okay? Without that further ado, can we basically give, I think a lot of people already give a couple of applause, and welcome Geoff from Anomali. We're basically presenting Empower Your Security Team with Approachable Threat Intel. Geoff,
thanks, Jeffrey. So hi to everyone who's saying hi to me. I'm sure I've met a number of you before. I've been working with the TOW group around CyberAttack series. This will be our 3rd year. So the guys have called it speaking virtually. So, you know, thanks for the interaction. I appreciate it. So I was going to speak to some, you know, COVID-19, but I saw the rest of the content was heavy around that. And Ty from Insights would have covered it as an attack vector and how you leverage data to kind of get insights. And I certainly saw Harish doing some examples there with Manage Engine. So I've changed the title, and Jeffrey's picked up it to talk about actually using threat intelligence. So I'm going to put up a screen, and if it's anything like what we were just doing there with Harish, you'll see me as well as the slides. I can only see me, so I'll ask Jeffrey and Christine to help me with any questions that might come in. So I've got 20 minutes. I anticipate taking 15, such that we might have some questions coming in the flow, or we can do something to the end. So let's get started. So the biggest challenge with the term threat intelligence, and of course with the construct of threat intelligence, is understanding what it is. So I want to go through a couple of slides. So there's a lot of data out there, particularly when you're talking about cybercrime and cyber threats. In fact, the operational environment at the big end of the funnel here is the internet. I mean, this is where the bad guys and girls and actors are working. So it takes a lot of work to kind of manage information from there through a process of, you know, processing the data, understanding what's relevant to threats. And then you get to the point where you've got a narrower wedge, which is some information. You know, that's IPs, domains, URLs that are proven bad and trying to apply some context around it. So you kind of get informed information. So that informed information drawn down from the data, you then need to see through a filter of your situation. So an example of that is if you found somebody that was doing a strong attack on Citrix infrastructure around this remote access time, and they had the tools, tactics, and procedures to do that, but you don't use Citrix, it's not intelligence to you. It's interesting information, but it's not intelligence per se. Once you've done the work, extract all the data from the operational environment, you've got information, and then you need to apply it to intelligence. So seeing through a filter of what Gartner might say, and this is a pretty hard slide to read, so I'll give you a moment. I mean, simply put, this is saying intelligence is the product of a process. And that's something I'm going to try to talk to you with today. So the most important things about a process is one, having one, and then secondly, understanding the audience you're taking the outcomes to, how they'll be able to consume the data, and how they'll be able to make sense of their next action. So threat intelligence isn't a decision itself. Threat intelligence is information that you, your stakeholders and executives can use to make an informed decision. So that's where we use threat intelligence. So it's our goal to inform with contextual informed data. But within threat intelligence, there's different levels of leadership that we want to inform from the strategic to the technical. So it's basically an intelligence life cycle behind all of this, but at the front end, there's a number of primary steps that you need to consider. One, communicate with your stakeholders about the actions so they can determine an outcome. And on the bottom right of this slide, communicate with your technical infrastructure so that you might take immediate stop or track actions. So on the top left of the screen, as I'm looking at, which says strategic, you've got some high-level considerations about macroeconomic decisions. And on the bottom right, as I look at it, says technical, where you can get all what we call atomic indicators to help you understand from a technical level how we can leverage our existing assets. Do we have a firewall in place? Can we improve the firewall policy with the content that we're getting from our investigations? Studying attack to the top right, as I look at it, tactical, understanding the methodologies, the tools and tactics that the actors use is something that is not an immediate return on investment by stop, block or track, but is part of the journey when you map these tools to a process, and I'll talk more about options of process later on, to the full levels of intel. So how do we go about managing to get to the stage where we've got something to communicate? So this is where we talk about the intelligence requirements. So up at the top level, you need a plan. And the first plan starts with the question, where do I think a gap exists for my organisation? Because I'm sure everybody on this virtual meeting would have already taken many, many clear measures, educating your workforce, leveraging your antivirus and your MDR tools, educating your firewall. So you've minimised your threat target space. So you really need to understand first what is your information gap, and then understand what threats exist that might attack that vector. And are they specific to my organisation, or are the attacks that are out there attacking health infrastructure actually attacking my infrastructure, yes or no? So through the planning and direction, you get to a point where you collect, and this is back to midway through that journey of data through to information. We get to the point where we've got new information, And then we can use that to come back full cycle to say, well, with this new data element of an attack, can I start a new campaign? Can I actually educate my tooling to go looking for similar tools? And then if you get to the end of that, you ask the ultimate question: did my process of gathering this information actually do something to mitigate the risk? Did it do something to the recognized intelligence gap? Or have I found another attack vector that I might be able to use to throw back into the investigation phase? So it's about getting new threat information to our collectors. The processing and analysis is receiving information, and you're always refining. On the basis of an investigation that you did an hour ago, a day ago, or your team did a week ago, you can understand some techniques to understand, is this indeed a path that I want to go down, or am I managing to go down a path that ultimately got me to a false positive? So a lot of this sort of processing seems complex and time consuming. That's where Anomali's threat platform and others like it would come in to help you write rules so that you can use machine learning to parse a lot of this hard work, and also bring your experiences back into the process so you're not replaying the processes again. So the next slide, I won't apologise for that I'm bringing back to another topic, but at this point in time, when we're starting to look at threat intelligence, I just wanted to reiterate what I think is the most important thing. You need to understand who will benefit from the information, how they will engage with that information, and then crafting some idea, and I love this word, shared vision, crafting some idea such that together, in partnership with the stakeholder groups, you might be able to do something that delivers a positive business outcome to the business. So when we talk about stakeholder engagement, the first thing is interviews with them. You know, I intend to take half a full-time employee to investigate processes that, to me, from the information that we've currently got, might pose a threat to our organisation. And I'm going to come back to you in 6 weeks, 6 days, 2 months, whatever time frame you both agree on, and tell you whether this investigation proves that we might be able to minimise risks to the brand. The information needs to be relevant, accurate, and complete. And depending on the requirements, the decisions, which are typically further up the tree than we will be working finding the information, may vary based on that information. So to get to the point that you've got a human readable decision-making artifact in front of your stakeholders, you actually have to go through a lot of planning and direction, right? So this is key to the success of an intelligence program, and that everything you do informs your business unit the next time they go about investigating this process, right? So you'll need to include the background of why you looked at what you were looking at, the information you came to first, how you got it, how you managed it, and then really importantly, how you would prioritise this sort of information. And the context is important. Your stakeholders will want to understand whether this has been a reputation or financial attack on organisations like them, or it's something that you can, they could easily dismiss as being something just for airlines or just for hotels. But if you're in travel, it's a broad platform, so you're going to have to tie it back in. So bring the key data forward, use simple terms, and start to promote some language using from the stakeholders, such that, you know, language they're familiar with, risks, profiles. So I wanted to talk through that. Behind the scenes, gathering the information is, you know, both a manual process and a multi-application process if you don't have a threat management platform, which is something that Anomali brings to play. You gather information from literally hundreds of sources. So you've only got a capacity to manage some of those sources. So we're looking at collection, as I look at it top left. External sources would be the local cert, whether you're in Hong Kong, Philippines, Malaysia, they're all so MY cert in Malaysia is a good source of information. The banks are sometimes good at sharing information. And also organic, which means you can gather a lot of information about campaigns that have already been mounted against you. So phishing campaigns identify infrastructure and also help you identify the human assets that the phishing campaigns are attacking. You go through a process of using that. A lot of that process is, in fact, magnifying glasses and binary code, but it's not if you're using the correct tooling. So if you could use natural language processing, that's the NLP there. You can use machine learning. You can apply methods learnt and proximity technology to help automatically narrow the focus. And then you've got output, and that output goes back to the strategic and tactical from earlier on. You can put some human readable story in front of your key stakeholders, and you can put some machine readable content in front of your technology that's set up to protect you. Just extending that one more step, there's full deep analysis. And this goes back to the point I made earlier about everything you learn, you need to reflect upon to see whether you can bring those learnings into another use case. So on the left, again, as I look at it, there's a number of different frameworks that you would map attacks, techniques, and procedures to. The one that started it all is up the top there, and that's what used to be, well, it's still called the kill chain. Underneath that, you've got both a diamond model, a six model, and at the bottom, the MITRE pre-attack and attack framework. Some of you would be familiar with these frameworks, but it's a way of getting common terminology to different steps in an attack. Once again, particularly difficult to do if you're doing it in Jira, Confluence, Slack, particularly easy to do if you're working within a threat management platform. I've just found this artifact. It's known to be doing bad at the moment, and it is about escalation of privileges in a Windows-based network. I can identify that as a capability tool, and if I ever want to reference a user that wants to attack that infrastructure, that information might be important. And then going into production, once again, the only thing I haven't spoken about before is the two bottom sub boxes. There's plenty of languages out there where you can translate what we call threat data into a valuable content package. Sticks, taxi, snort, Yarra rules. Writing and coding those is as hard as you would think it would be. And if you think you can Python hack everything to protect your brand, you can immediately think how long that's going to take, right? Once again, having the tooling to say, I've found this, protect it where you can, which is ostensibly what you can do with our platform, you're in a better protection state. I've gone past my 15 minutes, so I'm coming into a couple of close now. And I'm going to come back to a couple of examples of how you might message up to the key stakeholders. You need to get the right information at the right time through the right medium. If people like clicking through PowerPoint decks, that's how you need to deliver the information. If people want referenceable information with statistics, you need to give them that. If you went to anomali.com, you'll find in our blog postings lots of different artifacts about the way we communicate, things such as current attacks on COVID, things that were attacked to banking infrastructure a couple of months ago, international state-sponsored actors attacks that have happened recently. And with that, all of that work comes to naught if you can't reapply what your stakeholder learnt from that. You know, get feedback from them, close the information cycle with them so that you can take the feedback to the team. So with that, I just wanted to say that threat intelligence is the end of a process. And at the end of that process, you've got information artifacts that support decision making. Is this a risk to us? How big a risk? What do we do to protect it? And know your audience for communication. And every time that you do something, you need some sort of threat management database, if you will, and tools like machine learning and natural language processing that can recognize an activity and shortcut your time to recognizing it's an iteration of something you've seen before, so you don't need to relearn it. You can pull back those processes. So that's me in the time frame, Jeffrey, that I was looking at. I've left some time for questions at the end. I'll stop sharing so I can see some feedback here.
So the question here, Geoff, I'll probably read it out loud. I'm not so sure I understand the question, the last one, from Noor, is saying that our education area need and threat intelligence? Mostly the threat intelligence for critical industry like financial institute and telcos.
So if I was to replay the question, the questions coming from somebody in the education sector?
No, would you like to elaborate with that questions? But while you're thinking about how to elaborate your questions, I'm going to basically go for another one first. In your experience, do companies have their own threat intelligence departments? I rarely see it, but one second. Or is it just part of the function of a security operations center, SOC?
Almost always it's part of an SOC function. So we would see, thanks, Nora, I've got your answer. I'll come back to you. Almost always this would be part of a SOC function, and a threat intelligence program within the SOC function is typical. But they all start with somebody in the SOC doing this as a project because they found one thing that is causing them a lot of noise and a lot of pain. And through the investigation I spoke about there, finding out that their efforts were valuable to the brand and somebody going, okay, we need to do more investigative reports. In the bigger multinationals, the central banks, the big 3 or 4 banks, 1 or 2 telcos in Malaysia, as well as in the region, there are threat intelligence programs. It's unusual for them to be outside of the SOC. Going back to Noor's question, I'm coming to you from Australia, and we've had a lot of cyber attacks on our tertiary education infrastructure. And that's because of 2 primary reasons. One, there's a lot of international students in all of the universities across the region. And 2, a lot of technical people like to use the tertiary infrastructure as their playground to see if they can hack and attack. And if they can, it's an attack. If they can't, they've left a mess behind them. So there's a lot of information sharing within the university infrastructure, within the university tertiary information structure, where people are sharing attack methods and codes within them. In junior K-12 school, I've got no experience. I don't know whether anything's happening there. So that question through experience at tertiary. Sub-tertiary, I've not heard of anything, but that would be a market where education about pure cybersecurity hygiene would be more important.
Okay, so the next question is, could you also name a few specific sources where I can learn known TTP of attackers?
Okay. Well, doing a lot of reading is going to help in all of this. And the topics that you'd read about would be MITRE ATT&CK. So have a look at information about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That'll get you aware of terminology. When you move from terminology and want to actually look at real live data that is known bad and is being tracked for takedowns and is aging off, because when the bad guys and gals know that you're onto them, they leave the infrastructure behind. We've got a free You need a VM to set it, but there's a free download on our website called Stax, S-T-A-X-X. So that sticks language on a taxi server where you can get lots of what the industry would call IOCs, indicators of compromise. So you've got the language of the attack through the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but underneath that, you want to see the tools they're using. You would go through something like Stax. MISP is MISP, which is an open source program that might be of interest to some of you more technical people as well.
Okay, great. If, ladies and gentlemen, we still have 1 or 2 minutes left. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Geoff, please say something nice or ask the questions. Or if you basically like to organize the demo, you can basically go to the poll to vote it, and he will contact you directly. Okay, we have learned a lot of things today. This is the 4th session, so back-to-back, and we only have 10 minutes rest in between. Our next session is from Matthew, forensic person that I know for a long time. He's going to basically talk about, using Mac, forensic, artifact, and technique, and essential for Mac investigation. So really about cyber investigation, if you actually really get hacked, how do you investigate? However, if we have no questions for Geoff, thank you so much for sharing. Again, I'd like to echo that. Yesterday, we ran a CIO roundtable. They're not very concerned about what endpoint they're using or anything like that, because most of them have deployed endpoint. They're all basically concerned about the threat intelligence landscape that's changing every day. And what really important to them and what is not important to them is really, really hard to master. Okay? So using company like Anomali to be able to basically streamline all this and make it easier for you. If I say it correctly.
Yeah, so I just typed something into the chat there, and it was an afterthought. Another thing that we do on our website, also free and really interesting for current stories, and it goes from the business right through to the technical, is something we've called a weekly threat briefing. So weekly, you get 3 or 4 stories about real-time attacks, breaches, backstories, and technical artifacts. So that's actually a really good way for people to learn as well. So Jeffrey, great working with your team again. I'll leave you to close out your session, and it's Geoff with a G at Anomali with an I.com. Reach out, and thanks for all the well wishes to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We're gonna back to session number 5 at 12:20. Okay, so don't log off. I will call you back in the room at session 5. Again, if you basically go to schedule, then you'll be able to basically join that session again. Let's just take 20-minute break, and we'll back to our last and final session. Thank you, everyone. I'll speak soon.